morning, good Monday evening to you. Welcome to the month of November. Welcome back to Weather for Weather Geeks. Hope you had a good weekend, and October hopefully treated you well. We had a very warm and pretty wet month of October. And before we get to this week's forecast and the November forecast, wanted to talk some about the numbers in October because, again, they were pretty noteworthy. Now, temperature-wise, it was the second warmest October on record, barely below 1947, which is the number one warmest October on record. And overnight lows were pretty easily the warmest on record for the month of October. And so no surprise with the amount of rain that we had and those warm nights, the foliage season pretty late this year, and in some places maybe not as vibrant as we would like. As far as precipitation at the Youngstown Warren Airport, this was the third wettest October on record with a final tally of 6.20 inches, 2.86 above the average. It was pretty wet on the weekends, especially Saturday. We had measurable precipitation every Saturday in the month of October. Every Friday, except the very first one, was pretty wet. And the driest day of the week, strangely, was Tuesday, with a 0.1 on the final Tuesday of the month, but every other Tuesday was dry. Looking ahead towards November, this is the outlook from the Climate Prediction Center issued yesterday, and I have no issues with what they have out here. No areas across the lower 48 states are favored to have a cooler than average November. Now, our odds are slightly in favor of a warmer than average month. Does that mean it's guaranteed to be really warm? No. As warm as October? Very likely not. But if you were a betting man or a woman, you would probably put your chips down on it being a little bit warmer than the average in November. Now, this is despite the pretty chilly start we're going to have and perhaps a pretty chilly end to the month. I think sandwiched in between will be a fairly mild stretch during the middle of November. Odds also somewhat in favor of a wetter than average November. This is a pretty classic looking La Nina map here. These are the temperature departures that we typically see in a lot of La Ninas. Pretty dry in the southern tier of states, pretty wet in the Pacific Northwest, and fairly active across the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley. So already we're starting to kind of see kind of a boilerplate, kind of typical November-ish pattern, or a La Nina pattern, I should say, during the month of November across the lower 48. First day of November was today. It was a seasonable start to the day, 37, but overall a chilly one today. With a brisk wind, we had a max gust of 29 at the airport. 52 was the best we could do today, and actually, it's going to be quite a bit cooler over the next couple of days. We still have not registered a freeze at the Youngstown Warren Airport, but that is about to change. The average is in the middle of October. We're way behind schedule, and we're going to eclipse that very late end of the growing season we had back in 2019, when on today's date, we had our first freeze of the season. So the growing season is going to end this week. It's not going to be a record-long growing season. Actually, our growing season technically got off to a pretty late start this year, thanks to the chilly weather that we had back in May. All right, this system is a weak one, and it's going to be missing us to the south tonight. It's bringing us some clouds, but precipitation is going to stay to our south overnight. But there is chilly air making inroads across the lower Great Lakes and the upper Midwest, and with temperatures down in the 30s in Marquette and pretty close to freezing in International Falls, all this air is getting set, of course, to blow over the relatively warm Great Lakes. And compared to average, Lake Erie is running a fair amount above average. The blue line is the kind of the 30-year average temperature curve on Lake Erie. The red line is this year. This is where we are right now at the start of November. Our average temperature on Lake Erie is usually in the mid-50s. Right now it's closer to 60 on average across the basin. So it's a pretty good setup for some lake effect precipitation over the next couple of days. Now the first thing we'll see are rain showers tomorrow, midday, afternoon. A lot of us won't see any of this. Some of us can get a rain shower, especially Interstate 80 on north. Could there be a little bit of grapple mixed in? Can't rule that out, especially up towards Interstate 90. Now, by tomorrow night, the air is probably cold enough that we're going to see some of the first snowflakes of the season flying across parts of the area. Best chance of maybe some windshields getting covered and maybe just a little candy coating on some surfaces will be north and east of the Ohio Turnpike, north of Interstate 80, so parts of Mercer County, parts of Trumbull County. But could you see a flurry or two even down into Mahoning, maybe northern Columbiana? Yeah. Now, tomorrow night, where the sky stays mostly clear, and the best chance of that will be in our southern viewing area, it's going to be a pretty cold night, coldest of the season so far. Now, as we head into the day, Wednesday, still a lake effect regime here. Temperatures very marginal, of course. We're going to get into the mid-40s in the daylight hours. So, again, a rain shower, maybe a couple of snowflakes trying to mix in, maybe a little grapple, particularly during the first half of the day, Wednesday. In between, there'll be some sun, and maybe one more day where we have to allow for a stray rain shower, a sprinkle, maybe a flurry during the day Thursday before this high-pressure zone finally builds in and shuts off that northwest flow across the Great Lakes. So again, we're not expecting much in the way of accumulation here locally, but could some surfaces get a little candy coating, especially tomorrow night, Tuesday night? Yeah, again, especially I-79 corridor, Mercer County up towards southern Crawford County, far northern reaches of Trumbull, sure. Couple of slushy inches, particularly non-paved surfaces, could be in the cards for some of the higher terrain and the hilly terrain of far southern New York, around Bradford, PA, up towards Jamestown, New York, the Interstate 86 corridor across the southern tier of New York. Some of the season's first accumulations seem pretty likely up there. Our growing season, again, is going to end. We're actually going to string together several sub-freezing nights in a row. Looks like we'll get just a little below freezing Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, maybe some mid-20s in southern Columbiana County, where it stays mostly clear, but everyone has a good chance of seeing the 20s then. Wednesday night into Thursday morning, Friday morning, Saturday morning, maybe even one more morning coming up on Sunday before the thaw starts to build back in as we head towards next week. Another reminder, in case you have not been keeping up with my posts of late, my annual winter forecast is coming up this week on Thursday evening, November the 4th. The short to the point, short and sweet version, I should say, airs on 21 News at 6 and 11. In between our newscasts, I'll be posting a much longer version, more detailed version. We'll get into some of the why the forecast is what it is, some of the meteorology. Chances are, if you're watching this deep into this video, you're kind of a weather nerd. You like some details, and we'll do a version like that coming up between the newscasts Thursday evening. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been sharing some of my thoughts on the winter forecast, different aspects of the forecast this year. Wanted to look this evening real quickly at some of what we call the analogs for this winter. These are years, recent years, in which conditions in the oceans, especially the Pacific Ocean, even the Indian Ocean, are fairly similar to this fall heading into this winter. Also some things going on in the atmosphere above our heads, especially up in the stratosphere. We look all the way up there, and this is kind of my top list. Now, I did not include any analogs prior to 1995 in my list. I think with climate change, the oceans and the atmosphere were so much cooler several decades ago that it's not really all that useful, I think, to look too hard at some of those more distant years. So we kept it to 1995 and later. Here's the top list. My number one analog is 2017-2018. That was an up and down winter, very cold stretch, Christmas to New Year's, but then a big thaw later in the winter. February was almost a blowtorch. A couple of other notable winters on here. One of the coldest and snowiest, in fact, the snowiest on record is on this list, 2010-2011. 4 degrees colder than average, but more importantly, 119 inches of snow at the airport. But then the following winter was the opposite. It was a blowtorch. 2011-2012, almost 5 degrees warmer than average and below average snowfall. So these years, there's quite a bit of variety here. 3 out of our 6 years were colder than average, and 3 out of the 6 years, or 7 years I should say, were snowier than average. We had one blockbuster winter here. The other ones were more modestly above average at the airport. The average is about 67. And then we had 1, 2, 3, 4 years in which the snowfall was not particularly impressive. So that's the way the analogs look. We're going to factor in all this information. We're going to factor in some computer models, some experience, some intuition, gut feelings, all going into that annual winter forecast coming up on Thursday evening. Thank you for watching Weather for Weather Geeks tonight. I'll see you back here on Tuesday.